What's up, everybody? It's Mike. We're back here on the Pitch Please podcast, and today I'm talking to Ali from Auto. Ali, why don't you let us know what we're talking about today, what Auto is, and a little bit about your role at Auto?
Hi, Mike. I'm here to tell you about the future of lawn care. This is Auto. Is a really simple to install a smart outdoor device that irrigates and applies natural solutions. So really simple, set it and forget it type system that you just connect a hose and a Wi-Fi connection, and from there it goes putting down the right amount of water. And you also have the option to load in these people, planet, pet safe solutions like fertilizer, mosquito, and tick repellent. We even have a solution that cleans up and deodorizes after dogs.
Well, that seems like super timely because if you are in Toronto, where I am right now, the weather's looking beautiful outside. Lawns are just about to come to life, so maybe we've got you on the perfect time to be talking about this. But I'm curious what got you here. You're either the most extreme lawn hobbyist that just got pushed over the edge with lawn maintenance and manicuring, or you're a serial founder that fell upon this. But maybe give us like some background on where your journey started and what brought you to
Yeah,
auto to where it is today.
great question. And it's very it's a fantastic time. Happy spring to all your listeners. I'll go way back. So I was born very curious. I was the kid that took apart toys because I enjoyed learning how they work more than actually playing with them. And that led me in the later 90s when I was in grade school into coding. So I learned to code at a really young age. Developed our elementary school's website back when I was in grade seven, and from there continue building different sort of products, developing websites throughout high school. Got a little bit more into e-commerce, but then also delved into all sorts of different pursuits. I had a recording studio. We'd have high school bands come over. We'd do recording sessions, and then I'd help them sort of market and sell those different CDs. Of course, as you could imagine, high school bands aren't the greatest, so that didn't work. But that experience, sort of to be able to compose something and bring it out into the world, was quite magical and something that I fell in love with. From there, went to school for mechanical engineering, continued to develop e-commerce sites and kind of paid for my school through that. Fell in love there early on that, even though I loved the coding, I loved the programming, the physical products always resonated with me, the ability to touch it, and particularly when you're talking about automobiles. It's an absolutely wonderful experience, both from a user perspective, but also when you talk about engineering, it's really the ultimate and sort of in engineering marvel. I mean, this is a $25,000 machine that can go for years and years and bring you places. So I spent some time there in the automotive space working after university, and then got into a pretty exciting project between the University of Toronto and Mount Sinai Hospital, building a lesion detection device. That was one of the first opportunities I had, not only to bring the mechanical and electrical together, but kind of bring in some deep technical insights to be able to solve a problem. So that was really exciting, and kind of gave me a first look at being able to combine in all these different subsystems and what was possible at that time. From there, I was poached and spent the next 10 years designing and putting products into the automotive space. That gave me a wonderful insider's look into the supply chain, the reliability, how you build for scale. Spent a ton of time in Japan and in Germany with some of the world's best OEMs and suppliers, learning a lot about that process and what it actually means to take a concept and put it into the real world. And through that experience, I was able to design and put into the world a automotive product that is now on one out of every three vehicles in the world. So again, that a lot of that experience then ended up translating into auto, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But it was during those travels that I bought a small house outside of Toronto and met the same challenges most homeowners have. That look, I'm not a green thumb. I did not want to turn lawn care or gardening into my hobby. I was a busy professional, but I needed something to get the job done. And consumers like myself about 5 years ago have a choice between two pretty subpar options. That look, when it comes to irrigation, you can put in the expensive in-ground sprinkler system, and in Canada, the northern U.S., you have to pay for the maintenance of having to winterize that every year, or you spend the time going out there spraying by hand or moving sprinklers around and wasting water that way. And that's only on irrigation. And there's a lot more to lawn care than irrigation. You have to figure out these different solutions, and this is why auto is not only an irrigation device, but also solves this other part of it. That is the solution application. So the two subpar options there for consumers is one, having to go through the massive learning curve of figuring out what to apply, but then having to go out there on a consistent basis to do it. Or the alternative is you pay a great deal sort of to a professional, and that's where auto comes in, brings in the best of both worlds. So the solutions are priced just a little bit more than it would if you were doing it yourself, or sort of buying those different fertilizers and materials yourself. And because we're not having to drive a truck around or pay a person to apply these in a frequent manner, then we can offer that service as a much more competitive rate. And because it's cloud connected, we can optimize and really get you a fantastic outcome and fantastic efficacy out of those solutions, because we look at things like rain and weather and wind and really optimize for when to put it down and how much.
So if we go all the way back, Ali, you've always been like entrepreneurial or inventive, I would say, like curious. And you talked about like you take things apart to learn. That led you into mechanical engineering by trade. And from there you worked in some different industries, but we're always kind of like being entrepreneurial on the side. So like it was probably destiny that you would find the right passion point that combined with this knowledge of technology, and you said you were coding, but you like the physical element. And then is it completely coincidence that you worked in the automotive industry and then named your company Auto? Like, are those even correlated, or is that a complete fluke? And I need to
It's
know what this part is that you're talking about that's in
Yeah,
one of three, you said, one of
one,
three
yeah,
automobiles?
one out of every three, 35 million units a year. It's an alternator decoupler. It's the pulley that goes on an alternator in a conventional internal combustion vehicle. What it does is it prolongs the life of the belt, so it reduces maintenance, but it also improves the overall vehicle efficiency by about 2%. So you'll see them on a lot of cars. If you pop open the hood and there's a pulley with a black cap on it, that's the one. And we're really, really proud of that. And it was actually around, it wasn't auto as in automotive, but auto as in sort of in the Japanese sense of arigato, right? So if you're spending a lot of time in Japan, I saw a lot of the emoticons. When in the early days when I started working on auto, it was actually called Smirkler, Smart Sprinkler, sort of the combination of those two. You could tell, we had to change the name
That's a
pretty.
mouthful. I'm really
Yeah.
glad you went with Auto after all of
Yeah,
this.
yeah. Even when the founder can't say it themselves, and then something's wrong. But then we really tried first to look at the problem. Say, look, I think often founders get really hung up on the name and on the domain, and sometimes even on the product. And what I found is falling in love with the problem. And kind of to your point about sort of that curiosity growing up, I think it stems a lot from the fact that, anytime I looked at something or saw a process, that I always knew that product or that process was put there by somebody no smarter than I am. And that if I could understand that process, I can understand the product, that I can improve on it, that you can essentially poke the fiber of the universe and it'll respond back, and you could expand the types of products that are there.
So that, I guess, became a little bit of, you had this journey where you were a mechanical engineer in the automotive industry. And just for everyone listening in right now, auto, we'll call it out a couple different times, is OTO, just so I don't confuse you with bringing up the automotive bit there. But, you talked about like you weren't a green thumb, but you had bought your own house and you were trying to maintain the property. What was the moment? Were you just like sitting there trying to get sprinkler timers right or moving sprinklers around your lawn? You're like, I can't. I need to go tinker
Yeah,
in the basement. Like, talk me through that eureka moment of when you decided to
yeah.
build the smirkler
Yeah.
at that time.
Well, so at the time, if I had the ability, I would have hired a groundskeeper. So in essence, that was the problem that I was solving. And funny enough, the name after Smirkler was groundskeeper before auto. So it was Smirkler, groundskeeper, and then auto. Um, so really the genesis of the idea was trying to solve my own problem. And there's been this trend that's happened since the 70s. And let me just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Since the 70s, lots in general have shrunk and homes on those same lots have grown. So now what you end up with are small parts. It's not the same as it was with the very, very large lawns. And especially and particularly in Toronto, if you think about all the suburbs and sort of the rows upon rows of townhomes and semis, you now have pretty small to medium sized lots. So it just did not make a whole lot of sense to use the traditional, both irrigation and sort of solutions. So to your point, I started stitching solutions together myself. First saying, look, how do I irrigate? How do I apply solutions? And it was around that same time, and that sort of this is what I think tied a lot of it together. Around that same time, we had a bit of a wasp issue in our neighborhood, and I had kids. I had young kids at the time. Part of the reason I was traveling a lot and I had these kids, this is why I was really busy. But we had this wasp issue, and I didn't want to use any of the synthetics, any of the really bad stuff around the kids. So I did some searching online and found out, look, you could mix some cloves and lemongrass and some different botanical oils, spray it around, and that should be really effective at pushing these wasps. And I did just that, and it worked miraculously. Except it only worked for about a week. And you'll later learn that a lot of these natural solutions could actually be very, very effective, but they require more frequent applications. And as users are moving away from the harmful synthetics into these more natural products, these lawn care companies are struggling to keep up because they're having to, one, they have a labor shortage, and then two, they're having to drive these trucks, which inherently costs more, but then also with fuel costs and all the different added costs to operate that, it becomes really problematic. So this is where all of it kind of came together, and you said, look, um, if you can apply natural solutions in small frequent amounts, then you can get really good results. So when auto actually started, it wasn't an irrigation device. It was actually just a natural solution application device meant to hook in to in-ground sprinkler systems. So sort of the next stage was, well, can we implement sort of those early versions of the product onto some lawns? And that's when we learned the second part of the equation, which was putting in-ground sprinkler systems was cost prohibitive for a lot of properties. It's an absolute pain if you have established vegetation. And it also comes with this inherent added cost of maintenance, both because the heads constantly break. You have multiple points of failure between the pipes and the emitters. But also they just weren't very efficient. They wasted about 50% of the water just by virtue of how you would have to lay them down head to head. And a lot of them didn't have that intelligence to not be able to water when it's rainy, to look at factors like the wind. And to make matters all worse is that if you're in Canada, again, if you're in the northern US, you're having to pay quite a bit of annual maintenance to blow those systems out so you don't leave any water in there during the winter months.
So that's an interesting point. So you started as like the solution product for, spraying a solution that would keep wasps away. And then you were trying to introduce it either to, in your case, sprinklers, but you're like, how does this fit within existing irrigation systems? So maybe talk to us about, you know, who this product is for. So I think it's for consumers, but maybe give us a double click on like how are people historically solving this problem. So we'll park the solution bit aside, but let's just talk about irrigation because obviously these two things ended up fitting
Yeah.
together.
Absolutely. I mean, the device is really meant for the busy professional, the environmentally sensible, busy family. Our customers tend to be sort of millennials, first-time home buyers. They might have one child on the way or a pet or something where they're trying to not use those harmful synthetics around their pets or around their children. It's their first home, so they don't know a ton about how to care for a lawn. So it's a little bit of an intimidating task to take on. And like I said before, they're looking for a solution that saves them time and saves them money while at the same time doing this in an environmentally sensible way.
And so I guess people would be I haven't looked into the cost personally, but like an irrigation system has to be, I'm guessing, in the thousands of dollars for your front and backyard. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, we end up being around a tenth, if you need a
wow.
single unit, a tenth of a cost of an in-ground sprinkler system. And again, in-ground sprinkler systems have this inherent fixed cost because you're having to drive a truck around, you're having to bring the trencher, you have to bring all the folks. So whether you have 10,000 square feet or 1,500 square feet, the price of the PVC pipe isn't really that different.
Yeah.
And this is where we really dominate, sort of in that 10,000 square feet and smaller, where around two, even potentially three auto devices is able to cover your entire lawn and will come in at a fraction of the cost, plus all the abilities to, bring in the device during winter months so you don't have to winterize, the ability to set these intelligent zones and have it look at rain, wet weather, and wind, the ability to add and take away zones. So that's another capability that some of these first time home buyers love because your yard is not really fixed and that year over year you're making some changes, adding some shrubs
Yeah.
or some sidewalks. So the ability to just hop into the app and change that in a minute or two is infinitely better than having to call a professional to repipe all of these every time you plant a tree or move something.
I love it. So you effectively created the Roomba of watering your lawns.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But it
exactly.
didn't start as the watering or the irrigation. It started as the other solutions. So where did the ideas cross over and become one? And then maybe talk about like what that evolution now looks like, because I know you got a couple different solutions built into an irrigation system, but I'm always curious of like, was it a pivot? Was it just naturally like this is the most efficient way to just bring it all together? What drove that for you?
I think it's this. We have this concept. I mean, we picked this concept up from sort of the working in Japan and working with the Japanese, and it's called Ginchi Ganbutsu, which directly translates into go and see. So if you're trying to solve a problem, if you're trying to solve a problem of, say, a young professional that doesn't know what to do with their yard, well, you have to go and you have to live that. So that one of our first prototypes was installing 10 of these in-ground sprinkler systems to folks in my neighborhood, and we proved out the business model and that people would pay sort of that much, and that the solution was in essence putting in these in-ground sprinkler systems. So it was through the experience of installing these that you really saw, first of all, how difficult it was to trench. That, on YouTube or sort of when you see others do it, it seems easy, but in the real world, there's a lot of garbage and bricks and different types of things. You have to call ahead, you have to map it, and if the property is small, there aren't really good emitters or good systems that are geared towards 10,000 square feet and smaller. So it was sort of through that experience of trying to test out the solution injection that we covered that, look, this whole problem is all about needing someone else to really do anything. And that if we're going to be successful, we have to package a groundskeeper in a small, easy to install box. And that groundskeeper is going to irrigate and they're going to apply solutions. And in the near future, they're going to tell you what is wrong with your plant and how to care better for your plant. The very same way that, say, an affluent person would have access to a groundskeeper, auto kind of democratizes that sort of for the common homeowner. And we started with just a fertilizer solution, and then the mosquito and tick repellent. I mean, those were two quite natural solutions. One because of the wasp, and then the other one because fertilizing is very, very common. But pretty soon we started to uncover some pretty interesting use cases. So one of the solutions we have now is an enzymic based cleaner that can deodorize and clean up after dogs. So not only can auto say fertilize and then spray this mosquito solution all over your yard, but if you have a small dog run, then especially in the winter months, auto could put in the summer months, sorry, auto can put water in this enzymic cleaner down, and that helps a lot with the smell, but also helps prevent some of those yellow spots that you get when the dog goes out on the yard.
Okay, so you've got me hooked because I've got a female dog. And I
Yeah,
definitely know what
good
spots you're
candidate.
talking about. And it's only like you never let them go up, but then that 3 or 4 times, you got 3 or 4 spots instantly. It's a
Yeah, yeah,
100% hit rate.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
really good at nailing it every time.
yeah.
And I've got maybe the yard you're talking about. I've got this like L-shaped lot. Technically, if I take my front, my backyard, like it's about a third of an acre, but it's sort of like an L in the backyard, and then you've got the front yard, and you're moving sprinklers around, and you got the dog peeing, so you're hooking me. So I don't know if this is just we were meant to talk about this right on the cusp of spring, but this is perfect timing, Ali.
Yeah.
So how many different products? Like what is I know some viewers or listeners will have to come rejoin us on YouTube, but for anyone watching on YouTube, what does the actual device look like and how many solutions fit in here?
Yeah, so this
Okay.
this is the actual device, as Mike said. Or for our listeners, you got to jump on YouTube, but super simple to install. Just needs a standard garden hose that goes right in here. It shoots out a single stream of water that goes up to 40 feet, 35 to 40 feet, depending on your source pressure, and it rotates 360 degrees. From the app, you can select either points or lines or polygons that it will go and fill it in. So you can set however number of zones you want. And besides the hose, all you need is just a Wi-Fi connection. The device is completely solar powered,
Okay.
super, super easy to install. From there, there's a lineup of solutions that you can just scan using the QR code, and you have provisions there for 3 solutions to get loaded in. So these are the ones that are right behind me here. So this, for example, is our fertilizer with microbes. You just scan the QR code, load it into the device. That lets the device know what that solution is, and then it goes to work optimizing how much to put down and when to put it down.
That's amazing. So I gotta ask the curious questions. So all I need is the hose. Is this like direct sunlight, or it's pretty good even in moderately shady areas? Because I imagine you want to position it in an area that it's got like a good scope of your yard, maybe up against a fence or mounted on a fence. I don't know what's sort of the best approach to installing an
Yeah.
auto.
I mean, it comes with a really simple to install bracket that you can either put in the ground and auto sits right on top of that, or you can mount it on a fence or masonry if you want. We did a ton of work to be able to operate the device with, you know, limited sun, and that you don't have to be very intentional about putting it in the middle of the yard. So there's a ton of work done there to optimize how much energy is used, how it's used, the different mechanical, electrical components inside. But on top of that, we do include a 50-foot power cable. So for
Okay.
folks that, and we do have applications for folks that use it in very shaded spots, or and under canopies or something like that. And a small percentage of them use it, but we do provide a 50-foot power cord that if someone doesn't have sufficient light, sunlight, they can use that.
Okay, that's amazing because I'm almost envisioning where this goes in my yard. I've
Yeah,
got a spot maybe up against the fence that it
there
gets
you
good
go.
reach, and I think it'll get enough sunlight, but there's a lot of trees and they get dense in the summer, and so maybe it's not getting enough light. So you've kind of thought through all of these things, and I guess it would just switch between each. Like if it has enough power on solar, it would use that, and if not, it draws from the power, or you're kind of choosing one or the
There's
other
a,
at that
there's a
stage.
battery that is charged both through solar and if you have it plugged in. But yeah, I mean, there's a ton of work. We also have a lot of insights about where the devices are, how they're being used, how much solar exposure that is hitting them. So we take all of that fleet metrics, and we do a lot of work on continuing to develop the product, especially in the early days, to get a really good understanding of what that's, solar irradiance and where it's being installed throughout the US. So we use a lot of those insights to continue to
Wow.
improve the product. We roll out over the air updates, so the device gets over the air updates, OTA updates quite frequently, and we play around with sort of these different parameters to continue to improve the performance.
That's super cool. So I control this all from my smartphone over Wi-Fi. It sounds like I'm able to. Does it auto? I love it. Does it automatically kind of tie in with your weather app, or you hit skip or whatever in the application? Because I imagine that's a thing. Ooh, we've got a hot week coming up. We got some rain. At a minimum, it sounds like I can control that, but it sounds like you've got like some next level intelligence that you're
Yeah.
building in here. Talk to us about that.
There's we we save quite a bit of the water that is normally used, say, versus a traditional system. And a lot of that has to do with our precision and being able to put down water where it needs to go and avoiding sidewalks. But a lot of the savings also comes from our ability to look at different weather patterns. We make inferences about things like soil type and vegetation. We look at weather in a couple of days before the watering event, but we also look forward to so we don't water and then it rains immediately after. Same for the solution application. We looked at and ensure that it's not going to rain in the next day or two, so then that solution application doesn't go to waste. Say versus a lawn care provider where they've got to make the route, and if it rains the next day, well, there goes your application. With auto, looks at the weather, it looks backwards and it looks forwards, and it makes the best decision as to when to apply those solutions.
Wow, that's actually so smart, like how it's already doing all these things for me. How does it set up the space, I guess?
Yeah,
You were talking a little bit about the polygons. How does that
yeah,
that work? Do you have to go out there with your smartphone first, or how does this you
yeah.
use it? I'm so fascinated.
So most of our customers are able to get the device and their zone set up in about 10 minutes.
Wow.
It's quite miraculous. A lot of them call it magical. And we spent a lot of time doing that, sort of back to the concept of really understanding the problem and really walking through sort of the solution. But after you've hooked up your hose and your Wi-Fi connection and you have it set up, you jump into the app and that's how you set up the zones. And you have a choice between three different zone types. And the way you set these up, and we have a really cool illustration on autolawn.com, OTOLAWN.com. But I'll tell you now, it's basically moving a joystick on your phone, and that moves the water stream in real time. So you could move the
Oh
water
wow.
stream away, you can move it towards you, right, and left. And you get a choice between three different zone types. So you can pick points. So, for example, if you have planters or trees, you would just move the water stream there and then set a point. And your zone could be a single point or it could be multiple points. We also have a line zone. So, for things like hedges or rows of hedges, you just select that line and then auto will sort of trace it. And the probably most common zone type that is used is the area or the polygon zone. And you essentially create points. If you're watering a grassy area, let's say, you would trace points around the perimeter, and then auto will create a polygon that it will go and essentially almost like print the water. It just goes back and forth and line by line goes and fills that whole space up.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
So for the average yard, I guess, like I'm thinking even my backyard, I've probably got like a 35 by 35-foot section, kind of two of those that meet in an L. You would sort of put one or two autos and sort of just link them with a hose and have them go on separate times, and that would be able to cover all of it. And you'd be able to make sure that you're not watering your
Yeah.
patio and those other weird areas. You can water your vegetable garden a little bit more, possibly as you were saying, since that needs
Absolutely.
like a bit more love than your grass maybe does.
Absolutely. And you have the ability for every single one of these zones to select the watering amount, what the schedule is. When it gets towards sort of the hot summer months, there's often droughts and some watering restrictions in particular areas. So you can go into the settings and set that if it's odd days or even days or whatever you may be allowed to use. So there's a lot of flexibility around how it can be scheduled, but really the default and what we spend a lot of time on is back to that user that's saying, look, I need to set this up in 10 minutes. I've got other things to worry about. Get me that environmentally sensible with low amount of effort and save me time and money in the process.
That's amazing. So, I mean, it sounds like you've been doing this for quite some time. There's a lot of complexity here. There's some really cool tech, some really cool engineering. How long have you been working on auto? What anniversary is coming up? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, great time because last week we celebrated our 5-year anniversary. So we've
Wow.
been at this for about 5 years. And the launch was actually right before COVID. So we had put a prototype together. So as I was telling you, after we found out that we needed to make an all-in-one device, kind of stitched it all together and held a friends and family event on March 12th, 2020, right on the
Oh
Friday
wow.
right before we locked down. Yeah. So Those were really stressful times, but we'll later learn that they were actually there's a lot of silver lining there. So what ended up happening is we kind of launched this out to the world. We're really excited. We were going to go all sorts of different routes in terms of potentially raising capital, going to market, and then COVID happened, and we had to essentially you know, go on lockdown for the next year and a half. Um, and the next couple of months were really stressful, but sort of true to the auto fashion of continuing to ratchet and understand the customers, we started to reach out to some of these early folks that have showed indication, ran some ads on Meta and Facebook just to get impressions and sort of feedback. And this is when we learned that, because of COVID, that customer profile, sort of the homeowner who has no idea what to do in their backyard, well, now there was millions of these folks that were in lockdown that were getting into gardening, that needed help with irrigation, that needed help with applying solutions, and they didn't really know where to start. So we used that as a bit of a catalyst in the early days, one, to secure some early customers, but also learn a ton about what it actually meant to solve that problem for these customers that were now just getting into lawn care. So, you know, the rest is sort of history from there. We really got a lot of positive feedback from customers. We started getting calls, and we worked really, really closely with these folks over the next couple of years to continue perfect and really understand the problem. And we're now on tens of thousands of lawns. We cover about 30 million square feet of lawn and yard space, and we're growing quite rapidly year over year.
That's a cool metric. Millions of square footage of lawn impacted. I love it. So maybe that brings us to that point. It's available Canada and US today, maybe other countries as well.
Absolutely. I mean, focus is really important for us. So we've been focusing on North America. The device is available through autolawn.com in the US and in Canada. We sell out pretty quickly, though the device now ships in around 5 days. And we're continuing to get more and more product and continuing to listen and try to balance that demand curve.
Got it. And so, how much is an auto? I'm sure at this point people are curious. Spring's on the cusp. How much is an auto? And I guess since it's a part of the model, it's not just the auto, but how does it work with the solutions? Is that like subscription based, or talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the device is $399, sold on our website, and there's no subscriptions with the device. So customers are more than welcome to purchase the device, use it for irrigation. There are no subscriptions for the weather intelligence or the mapping algorithm. And we did that on purpose. We did not want this to be predatory. We really wanted sort of the value of the solutions to come through. And we offer different trials for folks to come in there and use the solutions. And believe it or not, most customers absolutely love it after the trial. They see the results, they see the convenience, and there's really no reason to move away from it. But yes, we do sell the solutions on a subscription basis. They're shipped every 2 months, and based on where your region is, you'll get somewhere between 3 solution bottles or 6. So another sort of fact about auto is it knows your region, so it knows when your first and your last frost dates are. So
Nice.
it'll send you different helpful tips in the app as to say, look, it's time now to bring your auto in. It's now time to bring it outside, and gives you some of these important seasons or dates throughout the season that you need to potentially go out there and do different things in the yard.
That's cool. So 399, I think that's probably for our US folks. In Canada, it's probably a little bit
Yep.
more based on our exchange rates.
Yep.
And so you can buy one, two, or three, and then you
Yep.
just order the solutions, but you help kind of guide people as to
Right.
how much you might need based on the regionality of where they're purchasing.
Absolutely. And we run different promotions throughout the season. We have different promotions on, more than one unit for folks that need that. And yeah.
That's super cool. So what's been like, I mean, you've got the advantage of you've been in software development, you've got the mechanical engineering background. So to most people, building software and a physical product side by side sounds like an enormous mountain to climb. And maybe it still was, but from your perspective, now 5 years in, and congratulations on the 5 year anniversary. It's a huge milestone. But what's been the most challenging part of this journey so far?
Um, it's always difficult building a physical product. I mean, there are inherent challenges that come with one, the cost of having to do and build a physical product, both in what it takes to get it to market, but then also what it takes to scale it with and the team involved, and also the cost of mistakes. So if you have a mistake, it's very difficult to go back, and if units are sort of sent back. But all of these, are really challenges that, at the beginning of our conversation, that there's systems and methods, and you can just be judicious with sort of your iterations and make sure that you're iterating in small iterations and sort of quickly over time. But one of the biggest issues we had, and in the context of COVID, was sourcing. So, the device, and I'll give you this one
Yeah.
example. The device has a pressure transducer, so it knows what the pressure is. And one of the features is because it deals with the pressure fluctuation. So if someone flushes a toilet or is showering, auto maintains that same point, regardless of what your source pressure is. So it adjusts in real time. Well, that pressure transducer was on the ventilators. If you remember, sort of when COVID was coming around,
Oh,
and we all thought that we needed ventilators. So, in our first year out of the gate, we were fighting against these medical companies in the midst of COVID trying to get pressure sensors. And that was challenging because that didn't let off for another 1 or 2 years. And then we had supply chain and logistics, sort of all the disruptions with container ships. So I'd say one of the biggest challenges really wasn't even about building the hardware as you would have, say, 5 or 10 years ago, but was around dealing with these issues of logistics and supply chain and securing components. But we got through it. I mean, we got through it because we have incredible partners, we have incredible suppliers. We've built really, really good processes that allows us to get over sort of these challenges in the future.
that's awesome. And what does sort of like the next six months to 12 months ahead look like for you? 5 years is a magical milestone, but I imagine the year ahead has some big milestones after you've crossed that threshold.
Absolutely. This is a fantastic opportunity. And look, internally at Auto, we truly believe in focus. And there's been a lot of different ideas. We are pretty much the only brand. If you think about the smart home, everyone's inside the smart home. Our
Yeah.
Ecobee and the Nest, and even the Nest cameras, if you think about it, are technically on the inside of the home because they're right by your door, right? And Auto is in the middle of the yard, maybe far away. So there's been a lot of ideas around what we can do in the future, how we can grow the plan. But I, really believe that these customers that believed in us, and these tens of thousands of customers that believe in us today, require tremendous focus to continue to purchase this device, for them to continue to call it magical. And that's what our focus is over the next 6 months to 8 months, is continue to extend the value of the device for our users through over-the-air updates, through improvements in performance and other features, things, the ability to help them out in their yard and determine what types of diseases there are and what solutions, or what even the type of plant is and how much they should water it and how to care for it. Sort of continuing to deliver on that promise of that the groundskeeper, and then also extending our solution lineups. Our customers have been asking us for plant food, so we're excited to have
Mm.
that being rolled out in the next few weeks on our website. So that solution is geared towards things like trees and shrubs. And then as a continuation of that, we need to start helping folks grow food in their own backyards. I mean, this is sort of a hot topic. Again, it's back to the environmentally sensible consumer, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, there's some fantastic land and fantastic soil, and if we can turn some of that grass and some of that turf into food production in people's own yards, then we absolutely have a responsibility to do that and help consumers achieve that goal.
That's super cool. Well, for anyone that lives in the GTA, or if you know me, make sure you swing by because I'm definitely making sure there's a couple autos coming my way to set up in the backyard. I love smart homes. I love how this all connects. I can already I'm already programming it in my head and saving myself a lot of sprinkler movement. I
Right.
got the half step there, and I've got like the timers that I gotta go run outside and do skip a day whenever the rain's coming. And I'm definitely got spots from my dog that need some solving. So I love that you are tackling this problem. I love that you've solved like the tech of the outside to your point where like not a lot of people play in that space. It's home automation, but also sustainable. I love that you're using, to your point, like with children or animals, you don't want to be using synthetic products if you don't have to or at all. So it's super cool. Now, are you talked earlier about funding and are you completely bootstrapped to this stage or have you kind of needed to kind of take on some additional money or where are you at in that journey? I'm sure others are curious to learn from your journey as a physical product manufacturer as well as software.
Yeah, I mean, we had to raise capital. We had to raise capital from strategic partners and sort of different even VCs. But it didn't always start like that, right? So I mean, the first few months was bootstrapped. The company I was working for at the time also took some interest early on, and they helped seed it and provide even some of the equipment so that we can run accelerated life testing to get the prototype out there. But yeah, we had to go out there and raise capital. But throughout the whole process, we really tried to focus on the customer and serving a customer rather than essentially seeking external validation, which a lot of what raising capital ends up being is external validation. I mean, you need capital, particularly for a hardware product of this complexity. But we were pretty scrappy. We used fantastic processes that allowed us to lean on things like computational fluid dynamics, 3D printing, and prototyping early on. So we used a lot of these tools and methods to help us get to sort of that end product without having to spend millions and millions on development, as you sort of normally would see with a hardware product.
That's super cool. Well, if people want to find out more, I think we've mentioned a couple times, we'll put it in the description, but they should go to autolawn.com, I believe, and that'll take you to the right Canadian or US centric site to order your own auto lawn and maybe your Roomba and your auto can be friends.
Maybe.
Maybe. As we sort of come to kind of wrap here, Ali, any advice for other founders that are maybe going on a similar journey, or maybe some great advice you've had? Because I know you've sort of been entrepreneurial from the start. You dove in on a career, and then the problem sort of sprayed you in the face, if
Yeah,
you will.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
any guidance or advice for others that are maybe in a similar setting that are tinkerers or figuring out when that right moment is and when the calling hits?
Yeah. I think one of the best pieces of advice I'd have to give anyone is just start. I think a lot of time you try to have all the information flushed out, everything from the name to the domain to your fundraising to what the product is, and what you really should be falling in love with is the problem and then
Mm.
beginning to work towards a solution while identifying who the customer is. And you'll be amazed at who actually comes along and helps you. And I never thought I'd be able to get any time with, for example, Tony Fidel, the founder of Nest. But you'll be amazed at what happens when you actually start making progress and actually get stuck somewhere and reach out to the right person. So in that case, it was positioning. It was about sort of the environmental sustainability or the cost in the early days, and I didn't know where to lead with or what features or sort of what to go. And I reached out to Tony and with his experience at Nest, he said, look, the early days of Nest, people just cared about the cost. They later went on and cared about sort of that the secondary aspect that it also saves CO2 and so on and so forth. So used a lot of those insights, but it wouldn't have happened if I didn't get started. And a lot of the discoveries we made along the way that in fact, we needed an irrigation device to begin with, that it wasn't just solution injection, came through us going out there and with a pickaxe, trenching the in-ground and discovering through Ginchi Gun Butsu, right, the discovery, the go and see sort of what that next stage is. So I think the short version of the advice is don't stress the long-term vision. I mean, being a great founder is about having a fantastically large vision, but being able to know what it is that I need to do today and tomorrow and this week with the resources that I have, and how can I just push that a few more inches forward and then see where that takes me.
Yeah, I think that's even really good advice for founders of what your role in the company is to keep people focused on some things that are only a couple steps ahead and managing the longer term vision to
Right,
not get distracted and to not get down by little things along the way and to keep going because if you work closely with your customers, the results will follow.
right.
Well, amazing. I can't wait to continue following your success story. I think I mentioned this before we chatted, but I've been like a fanboy for a while and I sort of had to go through a backyard renovation to figure out where everything's gonna fit. And
Yeah,
now that that's there, it's funny. I walked in and I saw you guys at Collision. I'm like, oh, have you? My friends, I was like, have you seen this auto company? I'm like, it's like Roomba, like you know how I love like home tech, and I've
yeah.
been fanboying for a while, so it's super cool that we got a chance to speak today. And I can't wait to see the journey continue to unfold as you take over many millions more square footage of irrigation and solution across the countries.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, Mike. I mean, it's the device, the whole company is something that I'm really proud of. We're really proud that we have another Canadian success story here, and I think the culture we've built, the product we've built, the customer base and around the brand that we've built is something that is going to be really exciting to watch over the next few decades, and we're very excited to continue to build Auto and build it into a household name.
I love it. Well, thanks again for joining us today, Ali. Thank you for sharing your story. And for everyone that tuned in, thanks again for joining us on the Pitch Please podcast. Talk to you next time.